Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be here alongside the Minister of Public Safety and on progress on our border security initiatives. But first, I'd like to address everyone in regard to the current tariff situation. My fellow Albertans, sadly, the United States President Donald Trump has decided to place a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods sold to the United States, with the exception of energy products, which will be tariffed at 10%. These tariffs are unjustified and a clear breach of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or CUSMA, that was signed by President Trump during his first term. This economic attack on our country, combined with Mr. Trump's continued talk of using economic force to facilitate the annexation of our country, has broken trust between our two nations in a profound way. It is a betrayal of a deep and abiding friendship. Albertans have bonds of family and friendship and business with Americans that span well over 100 years of shared history. We have always appreciated and shared the American ideals of entrepreneurship and free markets and civil liberties. Albertans, like so many Americans, also feel a strong sense of identity and are fiercely independent, as our fellow Canadians are well aware. But let there be no mistake. As independent as we are, Albertans are strong and loyal Canadians. Thousands of Albertans have lost their lives fighting alongside our fellow Canadians to secure and protect our freedoms and our country. And we will not cast those freedoms and loyalties aside in response to the threat of economic pressure from a foreign government, even an historically friendly one. Albertans will decide our own destiny, free of coercion from any government. So today I'm announcing the following measures in response to the actions of the U.S. President. First, I've directed my cabinet to alter our procurement practices to ensure the government of Alberta, along with our agencies, school boards, crown corporations, and all Alberta municipalities, purchase all needed goods and services from Alberta companies, from Canadian companies, and from countries with which Canada has a free trade agreement that is being honored. Second, no further purchases of U.S. alcohol or new VLTs will be permitted through the AGLC until further notice. We'll just have to drink a bit more BC wine and Alberta craft beer and spirits, and that's just fine with us. Third, I'm directing my government to assist our grocers and other retailers with labeling all Canadian products in our stores and ask them to voluntarily purchase their stock from vendors in Alberta, Canada, or countries that we share free trade agreements with that are being honored. Our government will also augment these efforts with a substantial advertising campaign to assist Albertans to more easily access information about where various products on store shelves are from. I understand as well that there's at least 4 apps that have been created in recent weeks and months that can assist Albertans in doing this. And fourth, my government will enter into free trade and labor mobility agreements with every province that is willing to do so. The goal is to have no exceptions, just free trade and free movement of Canadian workers right across our province. I also want to point out that Canada has a secret weapon in this trade conflict with the United States, a trump card, so to speak. And it is located directly under our feet, and it is called Alberta Energy. You see, Alberta happens to have one of the largest deposits of oil and natural gas on the planet. It is significantly larger and far more accessible than the quickly declining oil and gas reserves located in the United States. Whether the U.S. president wishes to admit it or not, the United States not only needs our oil and gas today, they are also going to need it more and more with each passing year once they notice their declining domestic reserves and production are wholly insufficient to keep up with the energy demands of U.S. consumers and industry, let alone having anything left over to export as they do today. We in Alberta would love to increase the amount of oil and gas we send to our southern neighbors to help solve that problem for them. Currently, they buy about $100 billion a year of highly discounted oil from Alberta, which tens of thousands of U.S. workers and refineries then upgrade into $300 billion worth of value to sell around the world. We have made a lot of Americans very wealthy. It's in both of our countries' best interests to double the amount of Canadian crude moving south. It means more Canadian jobs, and even more American jobs. It means lower fuel prices for consumers and more U.S. and Canadian influence all around the world. In fact, we've been approached with several new pipeline proposals to take more Alberta oil and natural gas to the United States, given the U.S. president's stated goal of U.S. energy dominance. Stated simply, the U.S. cannot be anything approaching energy dominant without Canada supplying a portion of the oil and gas. It is just a fact. The Alberta government wants to facilitate and to partner with U.S. companies and even the U.S. government to achieve their energy goals. We really would. It is the ultimate win-win scenario for both of our countries as well as our citizens. But how can Alberta actively partner to expand pipeline access to the United States when its president just slapped a 10% tariff on our energy products and is devastating the other industries in our province and our country with a 25% tariff, in violation of an agreement that same president signed in his first term in office? And the answer to that is we can't, and we won't. So until our U.S. friends come back to reality, we will focus on efforts and financial means to export one of the largest oil and gas deposits in the world elsewhere. We will look to our own nation's west and east and north coasts. We will partner with industry, provinces, First Nations, and the federal government to build multiple oil and gas pipelines to all of our coasts for the purpose of dramatically increasing Canadian energy sold to Asia and to Europe. And as soon as the U.S. government is prepared to respect our country and to treat us as allies and partners again, we will welcome the opportunity to partner with them to achieve North American energy dominance. Of course, for this strategy to work in Alberta, we will need to see a significant attitude adjustment from many of our fellow Canadian political leaders with respect to the importance of unlocking and exporting Canadian energy around the world. But I'm confident that Canadians want exactly that right now, and that they will elect politicians who share that view, regardless of who they may have supported previously. Alberta is counting on it. No nation on earth has more resource wealth per person than Canada. We have the potential to be an energy and economic juggernaut, able to punch well above our weight class in virtually anything, from energy to manufacturing to technology to military defense. As Canadians, if we're going to survive this dispute with our neighbors in the short term and win in the long term, we must commit to this strategy. No more excuses. It's time to start building pipe, developing resources, and constructing new ports on every coast without further delay. And as for existing oil and gas sent to the United States, Alberta does not and will not support cutting off or taxing Canadian companies on existing energy exports to the United States, and that's for two key reasons. First, doing so will hurt Canadians far worse than Americans should the U.S. retaliate in kind, which they will. The United States retaliation would most especially hurt those in Ontario and Quebec, which still rely on importing fuel from the United States, largely due to the cancellation of the Energy East pipeline project. If we had Energy East, then cutting off or taxing Alberta crude without Energy East, cutting off or taxing Alberta crude going south is utterly self-defeating. But also importantly, U.S. polls are showing that the Trump tariffs, especially against Canada, are not at all popular with the American public, certainly not popular with the stock market. And that unpopularity is growing and will continue to grow daily as these self-destructive tariffs drive up the cost of food and fuel and housing and almost everything else for American consumers. Cutting off energy entirely would make Canada the bad guy for Americans, and we don't want that. We want the Americans to blame their struggles on the actual source of their problems, that being the Trump tariffs. So instead, every Canadian leader should be engaging with the American people, their governors, and members of Congress to use their power and their influence to reverse the tariffs. To that end, I'll be traveling to Houston next week to continue that push. After all, the friendship and bonds between the United States and Canada are far deeper and more lasting than any one person or government. And as upset as we are, our quarrel should never be with the American people. They are our friends and family. Finally, my fellow Albertans, I'm not going to sugarcoat about things. The road ahead is very bumpy. If these tariffs continue for months or longer, there will be significant job losses. There will be higher inflation and lost opportunity. And there will be large budget deficits as our government seeks to cushion the blow for Albertans while ensuring that we continue to provide the public services and infrastructure that you and your families rely on. But let me also say that there is not a shred of doubt in my mind that we will prevail. We are a strong and free people. We stick together and we help one another when the going gets tough. We are relentlessly innovative and we find ways to overcome virtually any challenge placed before us. We always find a way, and we will do so again. And oddly enough, this crisis may ultimately result in our province and our country becoming more unified, more prosperous, and more powerful than ever before. May Alberta and Canada remain forever strong and free. And thank you for that. And now I'd like to turn things over to Minister Mike Ellis for an update on our interdiction patrol teams.